When the unexpected happens to your business, NJM will go above and beyond for you. NJM, more than you'd expect from business insurance.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into another edition of Inquirer Live at GameDay Central, sponsored by NJM Insurance. Today, we are coming to you from the press box in Philadelphia, where in just a little bit, the Philadelphia Eagles will host the Tennessee Titans. It's an anticipated matchup with A.J. Brown set to host his former team, and a matchup involving two first-place teams in their divisions. I am Eagles beat reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer, Josh Tolentino, and as always, I am joined by my co-host and fellow beat reporter, EJ Smith. EJ, happy Sunday. How's it going?
Happy Sunday, Josh. Everything's going pretty good, man. You know, it's nice weather here, not a lot of traffic getting in here today. So yeah, I'm excited for the game.
Yeah, man, it feels like it's been a while since we've had a day game. The EJs, the Eagles, just concluded a 6-week stretch where they had 4 games and 6 games. But now we're back in the 1 p.m. slot. Again, A.J. Brown set to host his former team. EJ, before we dive into it, where is the best place that our viewers can continue the conversation with us throughout the game?
Yeah, Josh, that's inquirer.com/Eagles game day. That's where we want to have a two-way conversation with you guys. You know, we put our analysis in there throughout the game. You know, we tell you what we're seeing, maybe some things you wouldn't see on the broadcast. And, you know, we also can read what you guys are commenting, what you're seeing, maybe what's mentioned on the broadcast. So it's stuff like that, whether it's analysis or observations. Like I said, it's a two-way conversation. Some of those comments we use for a segment later in the show. It's my favorite segment. It's called What You Said, where we take some of those comments and we kind of, expand on them. We discuss them here on the show. So you never know. You might end up on the show next week if you're over there at inquirer.com/Eagles game day.
All right, EJ's got you covered on where you can continue the conversation in a segment called What You Said. We'll dive into there later. EJ, let's not beat around the bush. What is the latest with this team? A.J. Brown, the star wide receiver, the Eagles gave up a first and third round pick on draft day to acquire him, and then they signed him to a very large extension, a 4-year deal worth up to $100 million. He's been about as advertised, I'd say, EJ, over these first 11 games for the Eagles, and now he gets to host his former team. What has A.J. Brown's mindset been like over this past week? It's kind of been a turbulent few weeks here for A.J. He tweaked his ankle a couple weeks ago. Then he dealt with that sickness last week on Thanksgiving. And also on top of that, EJ, he's had a couple uncharacteristic fumbles in consecutive weeks. What has been the latest here with A.J. Brown this week?
Yeah, he's still been relatively productive, but it is fair to say he's been in a rough patch the last couple of weeks, with the turnovers and just kind of going through, like you said, the illness and then the injury. So, yeah, I think that this game kind of comes at a good time for me. He was practicing all week this week, talked about how he wanted to prioritize ball security, something he couldn't focus on while he was sick. Yeah, I think that this game probably would have meant a hair more to him if it was early in the season. I think in training camp, he kind of said, like, I'm really looking forward to this when I got it circled. I think when we talked to him this week, he kind of said, like, of course it means a lot to me, but, I got to be a professional. I got to treat it like any other game, which I think is the right mindset to have. I'm sure the Eagles coaching staff is aware that this means a little bit more to him. It wouldn't surprise me to see them try and get him a couple more targets, in the revenge game, if you want to call it that. So, yeah, I do think that it means a little bit more, but I think at least, he said the right things about how he's trying to handle it, going against his former team here.
Yeah, he's about 160-ish yards away from eclipsing 1,000 yards. EJ, you've covered this team, I believe, now for 4 years. During that span, there's never been a 1,000-yard receiver. You actually have to go back to 2014. Jeremy Maclin was the last Eagles receiver to record 1,000 yards. Devontae Smith came close, but A.J. Brown well on that way. Speaking of 1,000 yards, EJ, Miles Sanders, he's at 900. That is a career high. Pretty impressive considering, 11 games in, so 6 more to go. And again, Miles Sanders, 100 yards away from 1,000.
Yeah, no, Miles has been playing really well this year. I think he's running with a little bit more aggression, just like I mean, when you look at his like broken tackles numbers this year, it's kind of remarkable how he's been able to run through arm tackles and kind of add a different a different attitude to the run game. I mean, obviously Jalen Hurts contributes a lot in being +1 in the run game and kind of just requiring a lot of attention. You see teams like just not really know what to do with him on the zone read stuff, and usually the running back has been a little more agnostic, at times with Jalen under center or behind center in the shotgun, but I think this year Miles has definitely contributed something extra to it. And he's been healthy, and like you mentioned in your story earlier this week, I'll give you the shout out. Like he kind of knocked on wood when he was talking about being consistent and being healthy, and those have been the two big things with him this year. It's something that we haven't seen the years prior, whether it's been injuries or ball security. He's been pretty solid with both of those things. He dealt with with some stuff during the training camp, that maybe kind of lingered into the season a little bit. But yeah, for the most part, he's been healthy this year, and yeah, doesn't have a fumble yet, as he would want me to knock on wood right now, as I mentioned that.
Yeah, and over the past few weeks with Dallas Goddard out, the Eagles have relied more on the run, again, with Jalen Hurts and Miles Sanders. In the case of today's game, EJ, though, they're facing a pretty tough defensive front when it comes to the run game. The Titans, I believe, ranked number one in rush defense DVOA, which combines advanced analytics with expected performance. Even just beyond that, just looking at the simple numbers, this is a tough physical Titans team, as Nick Sirianni described it, a Mike Vrabel coach team. It's going to be tough sledding, I can imagine, on the ground. Where do you expect the offense to prioritize? Do they get AJ Brown those early targets that you might expect? Does Miles get those 1,000 yards? If I'm going to put a lean on it, I think the passing game might be a little bit more reliant today for the Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at it just matchups wise, Tennessee's a little banged up, on the defensive line. Jeffrey Simmons is questionable, and Danico Autry, the edge rusher, he's out today. So they're missing some of their better players. They were dealing with injuries even before that. Their success against the run is definitely, worth mentioning. I mentioned it in my prediction, which we'll get to later. But at the same time, like the Eagles are such a unique running team, and we've seen the Eagles have success against highly rated running defenses before. Because even if you're good against the run, how many teams have a quarterback like Jalen Hurts and an offensive line like the Eagles have? So I do think that they could have success running the ball, but I agree with you. I think that if you look up the matchups, I think that the Eagles do have a significant advantage on the outside with receivers. Roger McCreary and Christian Fulton, they're both young outside cornerbacks. I watched McCreary at the Senior Bowl. I think there were questions about whether he'd be able to play outside. I think they're both playing okay, but I do think that, as far as AJ Brown and Devontae Smith go, and Quez Watkins, when you add him in the equation there too, they should have some matchup advantages on the outside. So I think that, against a team like the Titans, you could try and kind of lean into the way that they like to play, try and be physical, try and, slug it out, limit possessions and everything like that. But I almost think you want to go the other way sometimes, where you like your matchups on the outside, try and get them in a shootout. That Titans offense is a little one-dimensional with Derrick Henry. It's one of the things they miss AJ Brown for is being able to make plays in the pass game. I think that if we're just looking at it right now on paper, I think the Eagles have a matchup advantage on the outside, and like you said, I think that they could take advantage of that by kind of getting out to an early lead, throwing the ball a lot.
Defensively, EJ, it's a bit of a shakeup to the Eagles starting lineup. We're going to discuss injuries at length here in a little bit, but the most really significant change to that starting lineup, safety Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, he was playing at a Pro Bowl level. He leads the NFL in interceptions, recently placed on injured reserve with that lacerated kidney that he sustained last week. Insert Reed Blankenship, the undrafted safety from Middle Tennessee. EJ, what is the latest here with Reed? It should be mentioned that last week he picked off Aaron Rodgers, becoming the first undrafted safety in Aaron Rodgers' entire career to pick off the future Hall of Fame quarterback.
Yeah, so the Eagles secondary is now down two starters with Avonte Maddox on injured reserve, and now C.J. Gardner-Johnson on IR as well. Reed Blankenship played really well against the Packers. I watched the All 22. Obviously, in real time, you could tell he was playing well. He had the interception. He had a couple nice tackles in the run game, and I think this is another team that he could have some success against, just because it kind of fits what he likes to do. He's really good against the run. He's physical. He's not afraid to come downhill. That's something you're going to need against the Titans with Derrick Henry and this offense that really does prioritize running the ball. So I think that as far as Reed Blankenship goes, like I'm curious to see how he does. He has had the whole week to prepare. It's his first career start. Obviously, kind of the adrenaline kind of gets you through that first game when you come in for CJ off of an injury. But it'll be interesting to see how he fares. I think that again, like the matchup kind of works in his favor. Josiah Scott's going to be an interesting one to watch, just because he's been playing pretty well in that backup slot role. We haven't talked about him too much, which is probably how he would like it. But as they start to lose more and more pieces on that secondary, it does kind of limit what they're able to do. And I think it's something that we should keep an eye on throughout the game, because that's something the Titans could try to exploit. That inexperience on the back end.
EJ, let's fully transition over to who's hurt, who's healthy, catching up on the injury report. You hinted at it earlier. I think Eagles fans will rejoice, especially as they welcome in Derrick Henry today to Lincoln Financial Field. But first round pick, Jordan Davis, he is back. How significant of a addition is that for this Eagles defense? In recent weeks, they attempted to fix the issues against the run by adding guys like Ndamukong Suh, Linval Joseph. How do you expect Jordan Davis to shake things up there down in the middle of the defensive line?
Yeah, I mean, I expect it to look pretty similar to what it looked like before he went out. He's playing well before he got hurt against the Steelers. We should mention he said he's down 20 pounds since that Steelers game. He lost 20 pounds in a month. Impressive nutrition. I should probably take a couple notes on that front. He looks noticeably slimmer, which I think is important with a guy like him. Conditioning is a factor. With him coming out of the draft, people were curious about if he could really play a large number of snaps. He didn't really do that at Georgia. I think the 20 pounds lighter, that'll certainly help him. I think even so though, like you mentioned Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh, especially Linval Joseph. I could see those two rotating at nose tackle today. I mean, I think against the Titans, and even maybe just in general, the Eagles are probably going to have to use that 5 down front more often. We've seen them get gashed a lot in those even fronts. Whether it's maybe they think it's a known pass situation, or maybe they just are trying to get stingy against the run in that 4 down front. But they've had a lot more success with the 5 down stuff. So now that you have Joseph and Davis, maybe even if one of those guys needs a break, the other guy can come in. You can kind of stay in those fronts. So I think him and Joseph will probably be splitting snaps today, as they probably try and ease him back in. But I mean, I think there's plenty of snaps to go around against a team like the Titans, where you do, even on a 2nd and 10, that team's going to run the ball. So there's probably less known pass situations, which will probably lead to more 5 down stuff. So it's good to have the both of them.
Getting Jordan Davis back again, the first round rookie defensive tackle from Georgia. A huge upgrade there for the Eagles in the middle part of the defensive line. EJ, on the edges, although he hasn't been a major contributor since being traded over from the Chicago Bears, Robert Quinn, a surprise addition to the injury report at the end of the week. Robert Quinn, the defensive end for the Eagles, he is out today. What would you consider the significance of that injury? He hasn't contributed too much, so it kind of ruins that rhythm as he's trying to build here and get acquainted with his new team.
Yeah, he hasn't played a whole lot in the last couple of weeks. He's been kind of around like 10, 15 snaps a game, which is a little bit lower than I think most of us expected. I mean, this is a guy who had 18 and a half sacks last season. Now, when you watched him this year, it didn't look like he was, playing at that level, but still, you think he'd be playing a little bit more. So maybe it's a little bit of them trying to save him. But, at this point, yeah, he popped up kind of a surprise addition on that Friday injury report. We just got the inactives list a second ago in the press box here. He's listed as one of the inactives. I do think it'll change things a little bit. You might be seeing a little bit more of those young, unproven edge rushers that they kind of were trying to get off the field with the Robert Quinn addition. But for the most part, it's not going to impact the Eagles on the key downs where you were going to see Josh Sweat and Hassan Reddick on the field anyway.
And as you mentioned earlier, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, he's going to be replaced here in the starting lineup with Reed Blankenship, expected to be there in CJ's spot. EJ, what are the Eagles going to do over these next few weeks without Chauncey? The obvious answer will be Reed Blankenship, but that playmaking ability, that ball hawk ability there with CJ, he's out until New Year's Day, which is coincidentally, it seems like, again, a little bit a ways away because it is 4 weeks away. But on New Year's Day, the New Orleans Saints, that's CJ's former team, that's when he's eligible to return.
Yeah, and most notably, that's a week after they play the Dallas Cowboys on Christmas Eve for what might be, whether it's to determine the division or if it's whether it's to determine seeding. That shaping up to be a pretty big game. So I think that's why they waited so long before they put him on IR. They didn't have to make a decision until yesterday around 4 o'clock. And I think they waited to because if they could have had him back for the Cowboys game, I think they would have wanted to have him back. But yeah, as you mentioned, he'll get to play against his former team if he's back, in the minimum 4 games. In the meantime, I mean, it does affect what they're able to do, especially with Avante Maddox out. I feel like the list of coverages that you can call, especially when you're trying to get creative on third downs, I feel like it kind of shrinks with those guys in. You just want to have those multifaceted players. CJ's arguably the most multifaceted player on the secondary with his ability to play in the slot, over the top, in the box. Him being able to play from different alignments was a big part of what they did. So I think Reed can do some of that, but obviously it's limited. So yeah, I think that it'll be interesting to see how they kind of make up for the loss. Might be more of a long term thing than this game in particular. Again, I kind of think against Derrick Henry, you kind of just need somebody to get downhill, play in the box a little bit more. You're not as worried about stuff over the top against a team with Ryan Tannehill and the Titans. Kind of they seem like they're making progress, but the receiving core is definitely unproven compared to some of the other ones that we've seen the Eagles against this year.
EJ, it's time to switch over to our favorite segment. It is called What You Said. A reminder to everyone back home, you can submit your comments and questions throughout the game and throughout the week at inquirer.com/Eagles Game Day. That's where you can, again, submit your comments and questions during our show. Next week, we'll be over there in East Rutherford, New Jersey, with the Eagles taking on the New York Giants. We'll have a chance to read them in this segment called What You Said. EJ, our first comment comes from Philly Guy 54, who says, Derrick Henry may break a long one, but I don't think he's the kind of runner who will give the Eagles trouble, especially if Jordan Davis is back. EJ, I'm going to have to go against this one. Derrick Henry, he is the most explosive, one of the most explosive rushers in the NFL. We've seen the Eagles struggle at times in regards to containing and bottling up the rush. They've kind of got that bend but don't break mentality, just looking at their record in their first to second half defensive performances. But again, Derrick Henry, you cannot take him lightly, one of the most explosive backfield playmakers in the league.
Yeah, and he's been going through his own little bit of a rough patch the last couple of weeks, but I do think the Eagles' run defense, while it hasn't been as bad as it was against Washington, and at times in the last couple of weeks without Davis, I think that they still have been kind of shaky. There's been some explosive runs, some runs that they would like to have back, that kind of cost them. So. I think that again, it's going to be important that they get out to an early lead. But even if you get out to an early lead against the Titans, they're still going to run the ball. That's just who they are. That's what they do. So yeah, I'm kind of with you, Josh. I think that this is definitely one of the better. I mean, one of the best running backs in the league, and a team that won't get away from it, even if you get out to an early lead, or even if you try and make them one dimensional. They almost are like, well, we are one dimensional with the run no matter what. So yeah, I think it's going to be important to get points up because as they try and shorten the game and limit possessions, it's going to be it probably won't be a shootout just because of the way the Titans play. And I don't know. It's like it's kind of that age old question. Like, do you play into that or do you try and go against it?
Yeah, just in recent memory, EJ, when we were down in Houston, rookie running back Damian Pierce, he popped off for a good 40, 50 yards that first drive. The same thing happened with Jonathan Taylor in Indianapolis. And then, the Eagles made their adjustments and bottled both of them up for the rest of those games. We'll see exactly how their game plan with Jordan Davis back goes up against Derrick Henry. EJ, our next comment comes from D. Whitehead, who says this game will be decided on special teams, with the Titans scoring at least one touchdown on kickoffs and being able to get good field position. EJ, it's been a hot topic here over the past few weeks, few months, really since the start of the season. When your team is doing so well, it becomes such a, uh, everything's under a microscope, and it's easy to identify what the main issues are. Special teams, definitely, they've been plagued by performances here. What are your expectations for that unit today? Nick Sirianni this week in practice, EJ, we saw him keeping a close eye on special teams. He was on the field really throughout the entirety of those drills when we were watching practice.
Yeah, I think, it wouldn't shock me if we saw some changes at some point. I mean, it's the type of thing that has been, it's kind of just been one of those lingering things. I think a lot of people have expected the special teams to cost the Eagles a game at some point this year. Hasn't happened yet, really. But, against the Packers, Green Bay had a bunch of short fields just because, and that's one of the best return games in the league. They're one of the best return teams in the league. But, it was still like, I mean, they had a handful of drives that started somewhere, between the 40s, which is just, it's not. I mean, the special teams coordinator Michael Clay said it's like it's not acceptable. It's the type of thing that can cost you a game against some of the better teams. And I think Tennessee is, if not the best team the Eagles have faced this year, very much among those teams. So against in high stakes games against teams like this, you can't give up that margin. That extra 20 yards on a kickoff return is huge. I mean, it's the type of thing that can change a game. So. I think you're right. I think Nick Sirianni probably paid a little bit more attention to it than maybe he had in years or in weeks previous. But yeah, it wouldn't shock me if we saw something different. I don't know what that might be, but they might end up having to change something just to kind of get that under control.
Something different, anything at this point might be able to work for this team. They elevated practice squad linebacker Christian Ellis. Maybe he's on the special teams unit. Maybe a couple of starters are moved to kickoff coverage. We'll see how they adjust after giving up one of the worst performances in regards to kickoff return yards last week against Green Bay. EJ, our last comment comes from Drummer, who says, "This game will be to me a true test of how good the Eagles really are. Would not be surprised if the Titans win." EJ, I don't want you to give up your prediction just yet, but a phrase that you, myself, Jeff, have used throughout the week is a litmus test. It's going to be a litmus test today for the Eagles. I think that might ring true. This is a Titans team, again, first place in their division. They're playing for seeding over here over these last 6 games. Again, a high stakes game, if you will, for both teams involved, albeit on a 1 p.m. game here in Week 13.
Yeah, I'm thankful for the 1 p.m. start. We haven't had enough of those recently, but no, I mean, I think that that's exactly the case. And not to say that a loss here would, oh my goodness, the season's over, and not to say that a win here is like, oh my goodness, they're going to win the Super Bowl. But I think that it's just a matter of like there are a handful of games every year that you can kind of look back at the end of the season and go, that was an indicator. And I think this is going to be one of them. I think this is a type of team. It's a playoff team. It's an AFC playoff team, but it's still a playoff team. If you're curious, okay, how might the Eagles fare against a team like the 49ers in the playoffs? A team that's got a lot of weapons and, also likes to run the ball a lot. This is a good indicator for that type of thing. So I think that, again, these types of matchups are the ones that, you kind of just check them off. It's kind of like one of those big tests where, we can kind of determine some things. Now, the Eagles have done really well in those in the past, whether it was the Vikings game, which I thought was a big test for them. Whether it was, the second Washington game, I guess you could call that a big test just because it's, playing a team the second time in a row. Cowboys game was like that. There have been a handful of games that kind of showed us how good the Eagles are. And this is another step, whether it's a win or a loss, I think you can definitely glean something from these matchups because you don't get many of them. There's 4 or 5 every year that you play really good playoff teams that can kind of explain to you a little bit more about what's going to happen in those division and conference championship games, potentially that, that the stakes get really high. And, this is, I think this is definitely one of them.
Every time we spoke to AJ Brown or Nick Sirianni this week, they could not get through the conversation without mentioning Mike Vrabel. A lot of respect there between everyone involved. His teams are typically well coached. They're a physical bunch. And again, a high stakes game here in Week 13 between the Eagles and Titans. EJ, it is prediction time. But first, let's get some quick thoughts here from Inquirer Eagles reporter Jeff McClain.
Hi, I'm Jeff McClain of the Philadelphia Inquirer, and thanks for joining me here at GameDay Central. And to hear me talk a little bit about this Eagles-Titans game, which could be one of the toughest games the Eagles have played this year. I got to think that they're one of the top 2 or 3 units when you're looking at the Titans overall. Mike Vrabel always has disciplined teams that play tough, physically minded defense. And, of course, they want to pound the football on the ground with Derrick Henry. There's no doubt that he's going to get his share of carries. Now, the question is whether they can pull it off, because what we've seen over the last 3 weeks is opponents doing their best to stop Henry and force Ryan Tannehill to throw the ball. to a receiver group that's not bad, but without an A.J. Brown type talent. Now, when you're looking at the Eagles defense, will Jonathan Gannon employ more guys in the box up front, run those 5-man fronts to stop Henry? And we've seen him do that over certain parts of this season, but I think ideally he doesn't, because he doesn't want to take from the back and he doesn't want to give Tannehill the opportunity to throw the ball down the field and have these big plays that Gannon is so adamant about stopping. But I still think the Eagles got to sell out a little bit here to stop the run, because that's the key to this offense for the Titans week in and week out. When Derrick Henry gets going, when he gets some space and gets to that second level, that's when this offense is dangerous. And that's when the Titans can control the clock and keep the Eagles offense off the field. And that's what we saw essentially happen a few weeks ago when Washington was the lone team this year to beat the Eagles. They ran the ball effectively against the Eagles, and the Eagles offense couldn't get on the field and have enough plays to counter what the Commanders are doing on offense. On the other side of the ball, the Eagles are essentially the top-ranked running offense, at least according to Football Outsiders rankings in the NFL. And what they're facing is the top-ranked run defense in the NFL. So you have a strength versus a strength. Now, the Titans, I don't think, have faced a run game as dynamic as this one, because Jalen Hurts is a +1 in the run game. And while there are other quarterbacks in the NFL, Titans haven't really faced one of those guys. And you have so many weapons in terms of the pass game. You have so many weapons in terms of the backfield with Miles Sanders, Kenny Gainwell. Boston Scott's been running a little bit more these last few weeks. It's hard for defenses to account for all of that. And that's why the Eagles last week ran for an amazing 363 yards. I don't think they're going to run for that much against this Titans defense, because I don't know if the Eagles are going to really try and run the ball a lot, because what you have in terms of the Titans pass defense is one of the youngest and one of the worst pass defenses in the NFL. And the Eagles have advantages on the outside with A.J. Brown, with Devontae Smith, and even in the slot with Quez Watkins, who's coming on of late over the last few weeks. But, do the Eagles want to leave themselves, susceptible to quick 3-and-outs if they don't run the ball, if they don't control the clock? Because if it's going to be kind of a tug and war in terms of, who controls that ball control battle, if the Titans are able to run the ball and if the Eagles can do the same. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Stylistically, though, I'm not really sure that this game is one that you would say, okay, overwhelmingly the Eagles have the advantage. So that's why I'm going to lean towards picking the Titans in this one. At some point, the Eagles are going to lose. This seems like a good one for them to lose because the Titans of all the stuff that I previously mentioned. So I think late in the game, close game, could come down to a late kick. The Eagles certainly don't have the advantage on special teams, so that could hurt them as well. Maybe play here or there, and maybe that last play is a field goal that gives, to me, in terms of my prediction, that will give the Titans a 24-23 victory, and the Eagles move to 10-2. Thanks a lot, and back to you guys at Game Day Central.
Thanks again to Jeff McClain for his thoughts on today's game. EJ, let's get to you. Give me a player to watch out for, followed by your prediction. Before you say your player, I'm taking A.J. Brown.
Oh, you can't do that? I was going to take A.J. Brown. I wanted the obvious one.
Yeah, it's the obvious answer here. Can discuss it a little bit more, but go ahead and give me your player to watch out for. Maybe one more in addition to A.J. And your prediction for today's game.
I'm cheating. I'm taking Jalen Hurts, because if A.J. Brown's going to have a big game, then Jalen Hurts has got to have a big game too. I think the Eagles' passing game is probably what kind of sets them apart. Like, again, we mentioned earlier, I like the matchups on the outside. I think that they could definitely have success throwing the ball. So, yeah, give me Jalen Hurts and then by extension, A.J. Brown. I thought when you went to me first, I was like, oh, this is easy. Now Josh has got to pick somebody else.
Yeah, I think it's the obvious answer. I think across many books and places, I think his over-under is around 75, which is pretty high for a wide receiver in the NFL. But, he might hit that over again. That's kind of where, we discussed matchups earlier. They have an advantage against that against the Titans' young cornerbacks. EJ, what was your score prediction in today's Philadelphia Inquirer?
Yeah, I went Eagles 27, Titans 24. I mean, I almost like sometimes when you write the prediction, you know exactly what you're going to do by the end of it. I kind of was just writing and kind of hoping that it came to me as I wrote it. I could see the Eagles. I could see this game going either way. I wrote in the prediction that if the game was in Tennessee, I probably would have picked the Titans. Obviously Jeff picked the Titans. I think that this is one of those games that, again, it's pretty evenly matched teams that match up pretty favorably against one another. I think that the Eagles' home field advantage will probably come into a little bit, and I mean the Titans are a little banged up. Jeffrey Simmons questionable, Danico Autry out, so I mean I think those are pretty significant. Significant injuries. Even if Simmons plays, he hasn't practiced most of the week. So, so I went Eagles with a slight advantage, but I mean, I could definitely see them losing this game. It's a good team. Sometimes they lose to good teams. So, yeah, Eagles 27, Titans 24.
There you have it. We've got EJ Smith and Jeff McClain taking the Titans in a tight one. EJ, I believe I had the Eagles winning this one 24-17 in today's edition of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Give me the team with A.J. Brown. That's been a phrase that's kind of been repeated throughout the week, but I just think that the Eagles have more playmakers offensively. If they can contain Derrick Henry, that's going to be their keys to victory. EJ, any final thoughts here before we wrap it up?
I don't think I got anything for you. I'm curious to see what the special teams changes may be. And yeah, I'm still a little upset that you stole AJ Brown from me, right as I was about to say it. So, no, that's all I got.
Well, maybe mid-game we'll be able to circle back to our predictions and players to watch out for. Again, AJ Brown here set to host his former team, the Tennessee Titans. EJ, it is time to wrap up. Thank you so much to everyone tuning in to Inquire Live at Game Day Central, sponsored by NJM Insurance. Be sure to stick around on inquire.com/Eagles Game Day to follow along with us throughout the game and throughout this season. We'll have all our news and coverage there at our Game Day Central homepage. Who knows? The next show will be, again, back in East Rutherford, a quick trip up north for a Week 14 matchup against the Giants. We will be able to read your comments and questions there on our show. For EJ Smith, I am Josh Tolentino. Thank you so much for tuning in to Inquire Live at Game Day Central. We'll see you next week. Enjoy the game.